Hello guys, this is Arman, and today we're gonna talk about local variables and global variables. So let's start with the global variables. So global variables are declared above the main function and is the global space there. So let's declare a global variable int. Let's call it global variable. Globe var and it's 10. Okay, so and let's print it here. Cout globe var, and we run the program and we can see the 10 over here. So we can access a global variable in the main function, and let's declare a function now, void printing without any parameters, and let's print a global variable there, globe var. We're going to comment out this line and we're going to call the function printing As you can see, that function has access to this global variable. That's the thing about global variables. Global variables can be accessed from anywhere. There's another thing we're going to see. Let's declare a global variable with the same name, global variable. No, it's called globe var, right? Globe var is equals to 500. Okay, and we're going to have to declare it, so we should write integer here, and let's see this. So it's 10. So this function here is accessing this global variable, and we declare the variable called globe var. It's a written globe var, but it is actually a local variable. So this function does not have access to this variable. But if we print out here cout and this, what's gonna happen? Is it gonna print this variable or with this variable? Let's just print it and see first. Okay, there is no end line here, so let's comment out this. It's printed 500. So it is accessing the local variable. So if there is two variables with the same names, so the compiler looks for the scope of the variable. So this is the nearer variable. So inside the main function, if there is a local variable called a globe var, it's going to ignore this variable and it's going to print this local variable which is inside the scope. So we cannot actually declare two variables inside one single scope. We have written it, but there's going to be an error here. So if it's in a different scope, we can write two with a variable in the same name. Okay, let's now go to the in-depth for local variables. So this is a local variable, local var. Let's call it 500, right? So local var can be printed here. $500 is no problem. There's nothing amazing about this. But can we print this using another function which is outside this main function? So in the printing, let's try to print this. We can't. Why can't we do this? Because in this local variable is only recognized inside the bound of the main function. Its scope ends inside the main function. If we try to access this variable inside another function which is outside the main function, we're calling it from here, but the function is outside the main function, so we have no idea where the local variable is. This function does not recognize this variable. So what we can do here is pass the parameter. We have to pass the parameters inside this. So we have to declare the parameter integer. Let's call it local var, and and we have to pass this variable here, then it can print this 500 500. Yeah, it's printing one here and it's printing one there. That's one way of doing it. Another okay, that's how we do if we have to call a function. Another thing about local variables is the scope of the variable. So here you see inside this is a main function, the whole scope, but this whole main function recognizes this variable. Okay. Now if you have a for loop, okay, let's call this I. This is a more common scenario. I is 5. Okay, and we declare a for loop, and I is equals to 0. I is less than, let's say, 10. I plus plus. So therefore what we're doing here is declaring another integer called I. So shouldn't there be a conflict here? This is an integer I and this is an integer I. There should be a conflict, right? But there won't be any conflicts. We're going to see it in a moment. Printf I and line. See, there is no conflicts, and this for loop here is accessing this I, not this I. And if we print out cout I, you see this 5 is printing. What's happening here is this for loop, inside the scope of this for loop there's an integer initialized, and this integer I is recognized here. So this I is not used here. So what's happening here is this for loop only recognizes and uses this integer I, but its work ends here. Outside of this is unrecognizable. So let's say there we haven't declared anything here, and we're trying to print out I. So this is the I we want to access. So let's try this. But the thing is, what happens? Let's show the build. Name lookup of I change for ISO for scoping. The thing here, what happened here is inside this I only exists inside this scope. Outside this scope, there's no existence of this I. So what we had done before is we had initialized this I, so it was printing this, the above I outside here. So this thing can be used like if we have to use another for loop inside nested for loop. It's like a nested for loop. So we can write another I here. I is less than, let's say, 5 and I plus plus. So there would be no conflicts whatsoever. So let's just write cout. We're not gonna write main line. We're gonna, let's say, that I space, and let's write an end line here. So this is a nested for loop, and what we're trying to do is very simple. See, the nested for loop works perfectly with the same integer I. It's because the local variable I is only, this I is only used inside the scope of this for loop, and the above I is only used outside that for loop. So there's no conflict there. So that's all for today. I hope you have understood the uses of local variables and global variables. Thank you, everyone.